Emily had always felt the weight of the world pressing down on her, though no one could see it. From the outside, she seemed like a normal young woman. Kind, quiet, and thoughtful. But inside, there was a storm she could not calm. Her life had not been easy, and the shadows of her past lingered, often catching her in moments when she felt most alone. Every morning, she would wake with a heavy feeling in her chest, a reminder that the darkness inside her was never far away. She tried to keep busy, to focus on the small things, but even the brightest days carried the echo of old pain. Her childhood had been a mixture of love and loss, joy and fear. She remembered her father's booming laughter, which sometimes turned into harsh words when his temper flared. Her mother tried to shield her from the worst, but life had a way of exposing her to things she was too young to understand. There were nights when Emily would lie awake, listening to the sounds of arguments, wishing she could disappear into the darkness outside, far away from all the hurt. Those nights left a mark on her heart, a mark that stayed even as she grew older. By the time she reached adulthood, Emily had learned to hide her pain behind a gentle smile. She went to work, helped friends, and tried to make herself useful, but the loneliness never truly left her. She often felt like a ghost in her own life, moving through moments without fully being part of them. Relationships were hard because trust did not come easily. Every time she let someone get close, she worried that they might leave, or worse, hurt her the way others had in the past. It was easier to keep people at a distance, even when she longed for connection more than anything. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, Emily found herself walking through the quiet streets of her town. The sun had already set, leaving behind a sky painted in shades of blue and gray. The streetlights flickered softly, casting long shadows on the pavement. She had no destination, only a need to move, to breathe, to remind herself that she was still alive. As she walked, memories of past mistakes and regrets surfaced. She remembered moments when she had been too afraid to speak up, times when she had let fear control her choices. The weight of these memories pressed down, and for a moment, she felt as though she might crumble under the heaviness of it all. Emily's mind drifted to her most recent heartbreak, a relationship that had ended not because of lack of love, but because of her own fear. She had wanted to trust, wanted to let herself be happy, but the shadows inside her whispered constantly, warning her that happiness was fleeting, that it would end in pain. She remembered the night it ended, the silence that followed, and the way her heart had felt like it was breaking into tiny pieces that could never be put back together. Even now, months later, the memory made her chest ache. She had tried to distract herself with work, hobbies, and friends, but at the quietest moments, the old darkness would return. As she walked that evening, Emily felt a chill in the air. She pulled her coat tighter around her, the simple gesture doing little to ease the tremor that ran through her body. The streets were mostly empty, and the silence seemed louder than any noise. She thought about how easy it would be to let herself vanish into the night, to give in to the heaviness that had been her companion for so long. But deep inside, beneath the fear and sorrow, there was a small spark, a tiny part of her that refused to give up. It was that spark that made her take one step after another, even when every part of her wanted to stop. Emily stopped near a small park, a place she had visited often as a child. The swings swayed slightly in the wind, creaking softly, and the scent of wet earth filled the air. She sat on a bench, pulling her knees close to her chest, and let herself think. She thought about the dreams she had once held, dreams that seemed so far away now. She thought about the life she wanted, one filled with peace, love, and a sense of purpose. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, that life was still possible. But even as hope flickered, fear was never far behind. Emily knew that the darkness inside her was not something that could be easily erased. It was a part of her, shaped by years of experiences that had left their mark. She had tried therapy, support groups, and even journaling, but the shadows always returned, often when she least expected them. She felt trapped in a cycle of despair, unable to fully move forward or let go of the past. It was exhausting, and some days, it felt impossible to keep going. On that quiet evening, as she sat alone on the park bench, Emily realized that she was at a crossroads. She could continue to let the darkness control her, letting fear dictate her actions. Or she could take a small step toward something different, something better. It didn't have to be a giant leap. Even the smallest step mattered. She took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs, and made a silent promise to herself that she would try, even if it was hard. Emily didn't know it yet, but that evening marked the beginning of a change she had longed for, but never believed possible. The world around her was quiet, almost as if it too was waiting, holding its breath. She felt a mixture of fear and anticipation, a combination that was both terrifying and thrilling. The shadows inside her were still there, but for the first time, they didn't feel as overwhelming. There was a crack in the darkness, a small space where light could enter. As she left the park and walked back toward her apartment, Emily noticed the way the streetlights illuminated the path before her. She realized that even in the darkest moments, there were signs of hope. Small, subtle, but real. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future held. But she felt a little lighter, a little braver. It was a start. And for Emily, that was enough. That night, she sat by her window, looking out at the city lights. She allowed herself to feel a tiny sense of possibility, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. She thought about the life she wanted to build, the kind of person she wanted to become, and the strength she needed to find within herself. For the first time in years, she didn't just see the darkness. She saw the potential for light as well. And so, Emily's journey began not with grand gestures or sudden miracles, but with a quiet decision to keep moving forward, one step at a time. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy, that the shadows would return, and that healing was a process. But she also knew that she was no longer willing to let the darkness define her. Somewhere deep inside, the spark of resilience burned brighter than ever, waiting to guide her through the trials ahead. That evening, as Emily finally closed her eyes and let herself rest, she felt a sense of fragile peace. It was not complete, it was not perfect, but it was real. And in that peace, she found the courage to hope again, to dream again, and to believe that she could survive the darkness inside her, and one day, perhaps, find the light she had been searching for all along. Emily's life, though slowly finding moments of light, remained quiet and uneventful. She had made a small promise to herself to try, to face the darkness, bit by bit. But she knew it would take time. Then, one afternoon, something, or rather someone, appeared in her life in the most unexpected way. It was a warm spring day when Emily decided to visit the local farmer's market. The sun was soft on her face, and the scent of fresh flowers and baked bread floated through the air. She wandered among the stalls, enjoying the small burst of life around her. Children ran past, laughing, while farmers called out greetings to neighbors they recognized. It was the kind of place that felt alive and comforting, yet Emily felt like an observer more than a participant. She moved quietly, her hands brushing against the fresh produce, her mind drifting as she tried to enjoy the simple moments without being pulled down by old fears. And then she saw him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of quiet strength that made him stand out without demanding attention. His sun-tanned skin suggested long hours under the open sky, and his hands, strong and calloused, hinted at a life of hard work. He was arranging fresh vegetables at his stall, speaking politely to customers, yet there was a softness in his eyes that made Emily pause. She had seen people like him before, strong yet gentle. But there was something different, something calming and grounded that seemed to radiate naturally. Emily lingered near the stall, pretending to inspect the produce while secretly watching him. She felt an unusual flutter in her chest, a mixture of curiosity and a strange sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. When he looked up and smiled at her, it wasn't the kind of smile that sought attention or admiration. It was the kind of smile that simply acknowledged another human being. Emily felt a warmth spread through her that startled her. She quickly looked away, embarrassed by her own reaction, but couldn't help returning her gaze again and again. "Good morning," he said in a calm, gentle voice. "Would you like to try some fresh tomatoes? They're really sweet this season." Emily hesitated, caught off guard by the casual friendliness. Yes, thank you," she said, trying to sound confident, though her voice trembled slightly. He handed her a small tomato. "Here, taste it," he said. "You can tell me if it's any good." She took it carefully, biting into it. The flavor was unexpectedly rich and fresh. "It's really good," she said softly. "I'm glad you like it," he said with a small nod. "I'm Jake, by the way. I run this stall and a small farm just outside town." "Emily," she replied, unsure why she had offered her name. Jake smiled warmly. There was no judgment in his eyes, no rush to fill the silence. It was easy to talk to him, and Emily realized she wanted to. They chatted briefly about the produce, the weather, and small things about the town. Though it seemed ordinary, Emily felt something shift inside her. For the first time in a long time, she felt a quiet connection to another person. Someone who didn't make her feel weak or broken. Over the next few weeks, Emily found herself visiting the market more often. Sometimes she bought something small. Other times she wandered past just to see Jake and exchange a few words. Their conversations were simple at first: weather, farming, small stories about life, but gradually, they began to touch on more personal things. She didn't share everything, but she found herself opening up about little fears, small moments of sadness, and even her past struggles. He listened without judgment, with a kind of patience Emily had rarely experienced. One afternoon, after a long week at work that had left her exhausted and tense, Emily walked to the market with a heavy heart. She felt the old darkness creeping in, whispering that she was not strong enough to face life. When she arrived, Jake was arranging a new batch of fresh bread. He noticed the tension in her face immediately. "Rough week?" he asked, his voice gentle, as if he could see into her thoughts. Emily nodded silently, feeling a lump in her throat. She tried to smile, but it faltered. Jake didn't push her to talk. Instead, he offered her a warm loaf of bread, fresh and fragrant. "Take it," he said simply. "No need to explain. Sometimes a small thing can make the day a little better." Emily accepted the bread, feeling a small but undeniable sense of comfort. It wasn't just the gesture, it was the thoughtfulness behind it. She realized that Jake didn't demand anything from her. He didn't rush her to explain, to feel better, or to be someone she was not. He simply offered kindness. And in that kindness, Emily began to feel the faintest stirrings of hope. As days turned into weeks, their friendship deepened. Jake would share small stories from the farm, the sunrise over the fields, the animals' antics, the satisfaction of hard work. Emily began to respond in kind, sharing small pieces of herself she had kept hidden for years. She didn't tell him everything, not yet, but she found herself trusting him with parts of her life that she rarely revealed to anyone. And with each conversation, each shared moment, the walls she had built around herself began to crack. There was something about Jake's presence that made Emily feel safe. Something she had not felt in a long time. His hands, strong and steady, seemed capable not only of hard work, but also of gentle care. She noticed small gestures, the way he would steady a box of vegetables with careful hands, the way he would brush crumbs from the counter, the way he seemed attentive to the smallest needs of those around him. She realized that trust could be quiet and steady, not loud or demanding. One day, after helping Jake carry some heavy boxes from the storage shed, Emily felt a strange warmth in her chest. She had always avoided physical closeness, fearing vulnerability. But standing there next to him, feeling the strength in his hands and the kindness in his presence, something inside her shifted. She realized that perhaps she could allow herself to trust someone again, not completely yet, but enough to believe that not everyone would hurt her. As spring turned to early summer, Emily and Jake continued to grow closer. They shared quiet moments, small adventures, and a sense of understanding that neither had expected. Emily found herself laughing more often, her smiles coming easier than they had in years. And yet, the darkness inside her was still present, lurking quietly at the edges. She knew that healing would not be immediate, that trust would take time, and that the journey would be filled with challenges. But for the first time, Emily felt that she did not have to face it alone. Jake's presence was a reminder that even in the midst of pain and fear, there could be moments of light. And while she still had work to do on herself, she felt stronger knowing someone believed in her, someone saw her worth when she could barely see it herself. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Emily and Jake sat quietly on a small bench near the market. The air was warm, filled with the scent of flowers and fresh bread from nearby stalls. They didn't speak much, but the silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Emily realized that for the first time, in a long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Jake looked at her and smiled softly. "You're stronger than you think," he said, "even when it doesn't feel that way." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She wanted to believe him, to let his words sink in, but it was difficult. I'm trying," she whispered. "And that's enough," he replied. "Trying is everything." In that moment, Emily understood something important. Healing was not about being perfect, nor was it about forgetting the past. It was about taking small steps forward, allowing herself to feel, and trusting that someone could walk beside her without judgment. And though she still felt the shadows inside her, for the first time, they seemed less frightening because she had someone willing to help guide her through them. Little did Emily know that this quiet friendship, built on patience, kindness, and gentle trust, was the first step toward a life she had once thought impossible. Jake had not just entered her life. He had started to show her a way to navigate the darkness inside, offering a hand she could hold, even when the world seemed too heavy to face alone. Over the next few weeks, Emily noticed a shift within herself that she hadn't expected. The small spark of hope she had felt when she first met Jake had grown, though not without challenges. Life still tested her in ways she could never fully predict. Some days were brighter, filled with laughter and quiet joy, but others dragged her back into the shadows she had fought so hard to leave behind. The contrast made each positive moment feel even more precious, and each setback sharper. But Emily began to understand that both were part of the journey. Jake's presence in her life became a steady force she could rely on. He didn't solve her problems, and he never claimed that life would suddenly be easy. But he showed her that someone could care without judgment. One warm afternoon, he invited her to visit his farm outside town. Emily hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready for something so personal, so real. Yet, something in her heart urged her to take the small leap. She wanted to see more of the life he lived, to understand the world that had shaped him into the calm, strong presence she had grown to trust. The drive to the farm was quiet. Emily watched the landscape pass by. Rolling fields of green, dotted with grazing animals and wildflowers swaying in the breeze. There was a freedom in the open air, a contrast to the confines of her apartment and the town's crowded streets. She felt lighter, though still cautious, aware that stepping out of her comfort zone was not easy. When they arrived, Jake showed her around with gentle pride. He pointed out the crops, explained the care each plant required, and introduced her to the animals he had raised. The farm was a world away from the pressures and fears Emily had carried with her for so long. She felt the weight in her chest lift just a little, replaced by curiosity and wonder. Watching Jake move through his daily routine with quiet competence and care, she realized that life could be steady and dependable, that hard work could be paired with gentleness, and that trust could grow slowly, without force. As the day progressed, Emily began to share small stories from her own life. She didn't dive into the deepest pains yet, but she spoke of childhood memories, moments of joy, and times she had felt unsure of herself. Jake listened patiently, never interrupting or offering quick fixes. Instead, he simply acknowledged her experiences, giving them weight and importance. For Emily, this was a new sensation, someone truly hearing her, validating her feelings without trying to change or control them. Later, as the sun began to dip behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they sat together on a wooden fence overlooking the fields. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and earth, and Emily felt a calmness she hadn't known for years. She realized that it wasn't only the physical beauty of the farm that soothed her, it was the presence of someone who cared, who allowed her to simply be. Yet, even in these moments of peace, the shadows inside her lingered. At times, she would see a flash of doubt in the corners of her mind. "You don't deserve this happiness," a small voice would whisper. "It won't last. Soon, it will all fall apart." The fear was familiar and strong, a reminder of old patterns and wounds. But now, with Jake beside her, she felt a tentative courage to confront these thoughts, rather than run from them. One evening, a sudden storm swept across the farm. Dark clouds rolled in, and the wind howled through the fields. Emily found herself anxious, her old fears stirring as lightning flashed across the sky. She wanted to retreat, to shut herself away from the storm, but Jake calmly guided her to a covered porch overlooking the barn. He offered her a warm cup of tea, his hands steady as he passed it to her. "Storms can be frightening," he said softly, "but they pass, and you don't have to face them alone." Emily sipped the tea, feeling the warmth seep through her fingers and into her chest. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to acknowledge her fear without letting it control her. She leaned back against the railing, watching the rain fall, and realized that the storm outside mirrored the storm she had carried within herself. But unlike before, she was not alone. Someone was beside her, offering support without judgment, simply by being present. Over the next few days, Emily began to open up in ways she had never done before. She spoke of her fears, her insecurities, and the lingering pain from past experiences. Sometimes, tears came unbidden, and Jake offered only a hand or a gentle word, never pushing, never making her feel weak. Each confession was a small act of bravery, a step toward healing. And with each step, she noticed that the darkness inside her began to feel less like a prison and more like a challenge she could face. There were also moments of laughter and lightheartedness. Jake would tell stories about the mischievous antics of the animals on the farm, or about the strange things that happened during a day of hard labor. Emily found herself genuinely laughing, the sound surprising her with its rarity. These moments reminded her that joy was not impossible, that she could experience happiness even while carrying the memory of past pain. The contrast between the light and dark made the light feel all the more precious. One afternoon, while helping Jake mend a fence, Emily felt a surge of gratitude and warmth. The physical labor required focus and coordination, and as she passed tools to him and followed his instructions, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Her body was engaged, her mind focused, and for a few hours, she was free from the constant chatter of doubts and fears. When they finished, Jake gave her a small, genuine smile. "You're doing really well," he said. You've got strength you don't even realize." Emily blushed, feeling both pride and vulnerability. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let his words sink in, but old habits made her hesitant. I'm not sure I am," she admitted quietly. "You are," he said, with unwavering certainty. "Strength isn't just about facing the easy things. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. You do that every day." Those words stayed with her long after she returned to her apartment. Emily reflected on them often, repeating them silently in moments of doubt. For the first time, she began to consider that her struggles did not make her weak, they were part of her strength. And in recognizing this, she felt a growing confidence, fragile but real, that she could face her fears and continue her journey toward healing. The bond between Emily and Jake grew deeper, shaped not by grand gestures but by consistent kindness, shared effort, and understanding. He never pressured her to move faster than she was ready, never demanded her trust, and never treated her fears as insignificant. Instead, he created a space where she could be herself, flaws and all, and still feel accepted. For Emily, this was transformative. She began to see that true connection did not require perfection. It required presence, patience, and genuine care. However, the journey was not without setbacks. There were days when old anxieties overwhelmed her, when the memories of past pain returned uninvited, and when trust felt impossible. On those days, Emily sometimes withdrew, afraid of burdening Jake with her darkness. But each time, he responded with quiet reassurance, showing her that she didn't have to carry her struggles alone. Little by little, she learned that sharing her fears didn't push people away, it brought them closer. As summer approached, Emily noticed a profound change within herself. She was no longer just surviving day by day. She was beginning to live, to experience life in small but meaningful ways. The storm of her past still lingered, but it no longer controlled her every thought and action. And as she spent time with Jake, laughing, learning, and quietly confiding, she realized that healing was not a destination, but a journey, one that could be walked alongside someone who genuinely cared. By the end of that season, Emily could acknowledge her growth. She felt the strength to face small challenges, the courage to open her heart, and the resilience to confront moments of doubt. She knew that the shadows inside her would return at times, but she also knew that she could face them, and that she was not alone. For the first time in years, Emily truly believed that life could hold happiness, connection, and love. And with Jake by her side, the journey seemed not only possible, but worthwhile. Summer had settled into a warm rhythm, and Emily's life, though still marked by shadows, had grown brighter. Her time with Jake had become a cornerstone of her days, a source of comfort, laughter, and gentle guidance. She still faced moments of fear and doubt, but the presence of someone who truly understood her pain made those moments easier to bear. Yet, life, as it often does, was about to challenge her in a way she had not anticipated. It began with a phone call from her old workplace. A situation had arisen that reminded Emily of past failures, triggering memories she had worked so hard to put behind her. A project she had once handled poorly was now being discussed again, and colleagues from her past who had judged her harshly were involved. As she listened to the voice on the other end of the line, anxiety gripped her chest. Her heart raced. Her palms grew clammy, and the familiar feelings of inadequacy threatened to pull her into despair. Emily hung up the phone, tears stinging her eyes. She felt the old darkness creeping in, heavier than it had been in weeks. The voice inside her whispered cruelly, telling her she was weak, that she had never been capable, that she would fail again. She wanted to hide, to retreat into solitude, to let the shadows take over. But as the storm of panic rose, she remembered Jake. His calm, steady presence, his unwavering patience, his quiet confidence in her. These thoughts were a lifeline she clung to, however faintly. Without fully realizing it, she found herself at the market, drawn there as if by instinct. Jake was arranging his usual display of fresh produce when he noticed the tension in her shoulders, the tears threatening in her eyes. He didn't ask questions immediately. Instead, he offered her a small smile and a gentle, "Hey, you okay?" Emily shook her head, unable to speak. Her chest heaved, and tears began to fall freely. She had rarely allowed herself to be seen in such a vulnerable state, even by those she trusted. Yet something in Jake's eyes made it possible. He didn't judge her. He didn't try to fix her instantly. He simply reached out a steady hand, one she could hold on to if she wanted to. Slowly, hesitantly, Emily let herself be guided to a quiet corner behind the stall. Jake sat beside her, not pressing, not expecting, just being. "It's okay to feel this way," he said softly. "You don't have to hide it." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to tell him everything. The fear, the doubt, the panic that had gripped her since the phone call. She spoke of her past failures, the judgment of others, the constant voice of self-doubt that had haunted her for years. Words poured out of her in a rush, tears soaking her cheeks, shaking with emotion she had carried alone for so long. Jake listened silently, letting her speak without interruption. When she finished, exhausted and trembling, he gently placed his hand over hers. "You're not weak," he said firmly. "You've been carrying so much on your own, and yet you keep going. That's strength, real strength." Emily looked into his eyes, feeling the sincerity in every word. She wanted to believe him, but the old fear was still strong. I don't know if I can face it," she whispered. "You can," Jake said quietly. "And you won't have to do it alone." Those words, simple yet profound, settled in Emily's heart. For the first time, she realized that support didn't mean solving everything for her. It meant presence, patience, and belief in her ability to rise even when she felt she could not. The knowledge that she wasn't alone in facing her fears gave her a courage she hadn't known she possessed. The next few days were challenging. Emily returned to her workplace, still anxious, still fearful of judgment and failure. But this time, she carried a quiet strength, a sense that she had someone who believed in her and would support her no matter what. She faced the meetings, the questions, the scrutiny, and slowly, step by step, she realized she could handle it. Mistakes came, yes, but they didn't define her. Criticism stung, but it didn't shatter her. The darkness was present, but it was no longer overwhelming. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward in spite of it. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Emily returned to the farm. Jake was waiting, as always, with a calm smile and the quiet steadiness that had become her anchor. They walked together through the fields. The warm evening air filled with the scent of grass and earth. Emily felt the tension in her body slowly release, replaced by a sense of safety she hadn't known she could feel. As they walked, Emily spoke softly. "I thought I would never be able to face them, my fears, my past. But today, somehow, I managed." Jake nodded, his gaze steady. "That's amazing. You did it, even though it was hard. That's what matters. Every small step counts." They reached a quiet spot near a small pond, the water reflecting the soft hues of the setting sun. Emily sat on a fallen log, exhausted but exhilarated. Jake joined her, sitting close enough to be comforting without crowding her. The quiet between them was peaceful, a shared space where words weren't always necessary. Then, almost without realizing it, Emily leaned slightly toward him. The proximity, the steady presence, the warmth of his hand near hers, it all felt like a lifeline she didn't want to let go of. I can't resist your hands," she whispered, the words trembling with vulnerability. It wasn't just a physical statement, it was a declaration of trust, of surrender, of allowing someone to be close when she had spent so long keeping others away. Jake looked at her with quiet understanding, his own emotions steady but sincere. "And you don't have to," he said softly. "You can let me in. At your own pace. Always at your pace." In that moment, something profound shifted within Emily. She realized that she had begun to believe not just in Jake, but in herself. She had faced a crisis, confronted the darkest parts of her fear, and survived. She had allowed herself to trust, to feel, and to lean on someone else, without shame. It was a turning point she had longed for but never truly thought possible. The following days were filled with small victories. Emily continued to confront her fears, each step building on the last. She began to take more initiative at work, to speak up when she previously would have stayed silent, and to acknowledge her own strengths instead of dwelling on past failures. She still felt fear, doubt, and sadness at times. But these emotions no longer dictated her life. The darkness was still present, but she had learned that it didn't have to control her. Meanwhile, her bond with Jake deepened in quiet, meaningful ways. They shared long walks, late-night conversations, and simple moments of laughter. He never forced her to move faster than she was ready, never judged her for her fears, and never expected perfection. In his presence, Emily discovered that love, trust, and companionship were not about grand gestures. They were about patience, understanding, and unwavering support. One evening, as they sat by the pond watching fireflies dance in the warm summer air, Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had come so far, and yet she knew the journey was not over. There would still be challenges, still be moments of fear and doubt. But she had discovered something she had once thought impossible: the ability to face life with courage, supported by someone who truly cared. She leaned her head slightly toward Jake, feeling the strength in his presence and the warmth of his hands. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with sincerity, "for believing in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself." Jake smiled, gently taking her hand in his. "You never needed me to believe in you more than you already could." In that quiet moment, Emily realized that the turning point she had feared, the crisis that had brought her to the edge of despair, had become a doorway. Through it, she had stepped closer to the life she had longed for. A life where shadows still existed, yes, but where hope, trust, and love could shine alongside them. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink, Emily felt a fragile but powerful sense of triumph. She had faced her darkest fears, allowed herself to trust, and opened her heart just enough to let someone in. The journey was far from over, but she had taken a step she would never forget. A step toward healing, toward connection, and toward a future she could finally believe in. The days following the turning point felt lighter for Emily. The darkness inside her, though still present at times, no longer controlled her. She had faced her fears and survived them, discovering a strength she had doubted existed. With Jake by her side, she began to understand what it meant to truly live again, to take joy in simple moments, to trust someone fully, and to believe in her own resilience. Summer was gradually giving way to early autumn. The warm, golden light softened the world, painting the fields and streets in comforting hues. Emily spent her mornings at work, carrying out her duties with a newfound confidence. She still faced challenges, projects that tested her skills, deadlines that seemed impossible, but each time she felt doubt creeping in. She reminded herself of how far she had come. She had survived crises before, and now, with Jake's encouragement, she was learning to handle life with courage and clarity. In the afternoons, she often found herself at the farm. Jake welcomed her presence, never imposing expectations, but always glad to share time with her. Together, they worked on small projects, from tending crops to fixing fences, and each task became a lesson in patience, perseverance, and quiet companionship. Emily discovered that physical labor was surprisingly healing. It allowed her to focus her mind and body, to feel capable and strong, and to appreciate the satisfaction that comes from nurturing life. During one of their walks through the fields, Emily reflected on her journey. "I can't believe how much has changed," she said softly. "I used to feel trapped by my past, by my fears. But now, I feel like I can breathe again." Jake nodded, his eyes calm and steady. "You've done the work, Emily. You've faced the darkness instead of running from it. That takes courage. And it takes heart." Emily smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She realized that courage wasn't about never being afraid. It was about continuing forward, even when fear existed. She had learned that resilience was built through small, persistent steps, not sudden transformations. And she was proud of herself not because she had become perfect, but because she had begun to reclaim her life. As autumn arrived in full, Emily and Jake spent long evenings by the fire in his small cabin near the farm. The nights were cool, the stars clear and bright, and the world felt peaceful in a way that Emily had rarely experienced. They would talk about dreams and hopes, past mistakes and future possibilities, sharing stories and reflections. Emily found herself laughing more freely, opening her heart without fear of judgment, and discovering joy in moments that once would have been shadowed by doubt. One evening, as the fire crackled warmly, Emily spoke of her dreams for the future. "I want to do more," she said, quietly. "Not just survive, not just get by, but really live. I want to help others who feel trapped, like I once did. I want to make a difference, even in small ways." Jake reached for her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. "And you will," he said. "You've already begun. Your courage and your heart will guide you. And I'll be here for every step." For Emily, these words were more than reassurance, they were affirmation that she could trust herself and others. The thought that someone could believe in her so completely, without needing her to be anyone other than herself, was a revelation. She realized that true connection did not require perfection, but vulnerability, honesty, and patience. As the weeks passed, Emily took small steps toward her goals. She volunteered at a local community center, offering support to people who had experienced hardships similar to her own. She shared her story carefully, with honesty and sensitivity, and discovered that her experiences could inspire and comfort others. With each act of kindness, she felt stronger, more confident, and more connected to the world around her. Her relationship with Jake deepened naturally. There were no dramatic declarations or rushed promises, just a steady, growing bond, built on trust, respect, and love. They continued to enjoy simple pleasures, tending the farm, walking through golden fields, watching sunsets, and sharing quiet meals. Each moment, though ordinary on the surface, carried profound meaning for Emily. She had learned to value presence, attention, and care, things she had once taken for granted. One crisp autumn evening, Emily and Jake walked to the edge of the farm, where the trees blazed with orange and red leaves. The air was cool, and the scent of earth and falling leaves filled the atmosphere. Emily paused, taking a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace she had never thought possible. "I never imagined life could feel like this," she whispered. "I used to be so afraid, so trapped. But now, I feel free." Jake reached for her hand, holding it gently. "You've earned this freedom, Emily. And you've created it for yourself. I'm just here to remind you of your strength." Emily looked into his eyes, seeing patience, understanding, and a quiet love that needed no words. She realized that she no longer feared being vulnerable with him. She could allow herself to feel, to trust, and to lean on someone else without shame. For the first time in years, she felt fully seen and accepted. As the days turned to weeks, Emily's confidence grew. She faced challenges with determination. laughed freely, and embraced opportunities that once would have terrified her. She discovered the power of small victories, of persistence, and of self-compassion. She no longer defined herself by her fears or her past. She defined herself by her resilience, her heart, and her willingness to keep moving forward. Jake continued to support her, not by solving her problems, but by being present and patient. He celebrated her victories, no matter how small, and offered comfort when she stumbled. Together, they created a life rooted in trust, understanding, and shared experiences. Emily realized that love was not about perfection or dramatic moments. It was about being steady, caring, and present through the ordinary and extraordinary alike. As the first snow of the season fell, blanketing the farm in quiet white, Emily stood by the window of Jake's cabin, watching the flakes drift down. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey she had taken. The darkness that once seemed unending had lost its power over her. She had faced fear, embraced vulnerability, and allowed herself to love and be loved. And through it all, she had discovered the strength within herself that she had long believed lost. That night, as they sat together by the fire, Emily rested her head on Jake's shoulder. The warmth of the fire, the gentle presence of someone who truly cared, and the soft hush of snow outside combined to create a sense of safety and belonging she had never known. She realized that happiness was not something distant or unattainable. It was a series of small moments, nurtured by courage, trust, and connection. "I never thought I could feel this alive," Emily whispered. "I feel like I'm finally living, not just surviving." Jake smiled, holding her hand firmly. "And you are. Every step you've taken has brought you here. You've reclaimed your life, Emily, and this is just the beginning." In that moment, Emily understood the true meaning of resilience. It was not about forgetting the past or erasing pain. It was about facing it, learning from it, and allowing oneself to move forward despite it. It was about opening the heart to love, to connection, and to life itself. And she realized that with courage, patience, and the support of someone who genuinely cared, anything was possible. The weeks and months that followed were filled with continued growth. Emily embraced new challenges at work, deepened her involvement in the community, and cultivated her relationship with Jake. Each day offered opportunities for learning, reflection, and joy. The shadows of her past remained, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they became reminders of how far she had come, of the strength she had discovered, and of the life she had chosen to reclaim. By the time spring returned, Emily could look back on the year with pride. She had faced fear, embraced vulnerability, and allowed herself to trust again. She had discovered the transformative power of patience, understanding, and love. And most importantly, she had learned to believe in herself, to honor her journey, and to step forward into a life filled with hope, possibility, and light. With Jake by her side, Emily knew that she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. She had learned that life was not about avoiding darkness, but about finding light within it, and about sharing that light with others. She had discovered that healing was not linear, that strength was born through struggle, and that love, steady, kind, and patient, could transform even the deepest pain into hope. And as Emily stood in the golden fields, hand in hand with Jake, watching the sun set behind the hills, she felt a deep sense of peace. The darkness inside her was no longer a prison. It was a part of her story, a chapter she had survived, learned from, and grown beyond. She smiled softly, knowing that her journey was ongoing, but confident that she had found the strength, love, and hope to walk it fully.